Well, good morning. Welcome to Walking Boxing. It is Thursday, November 7th, 2024. And what a beautiful morning we have today. Is it just me, or the air smells a lot cleaner today than what it did yesterday? And if you could probably see below, I've got a little bit of the Conor McGregor strut happening at the moment as well, walking around the neighbourhood. I was going to put the MAGA hat on, but I live in a very liberal neighbourhood, and there'd be a few of them hurting at the moment, so we won't rub it in, not yet anyway. But look, all jokes aside, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but and I know not a lot of you out there, well, a lot of you out there won't agree with what's happened and my opinions and others, but then that's fine. That's why it's a democracy. But for me, I'm just praying that this will restore a little bit of sanity in the world. All this woke shit that's been shoved down our throats for the last 4 or 5 years, being labelled all sorts of names and terms and labels and all this sort of stuff, just because you love your country, just because you love conservative values, just because you want the best for your kids, and just because you lean a certain way, that you're a despicable human being. And it's just been funny just watch it. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but watching all the social media and the news outlets all having meltdowns, and you know, there's one guy on there, oh, I'm going to delete my X account, I'm never going to buy a Tesla, oh, you wanted a dictatorship, you've got it. Oh my God, come on guys, you need to get out. The people like this is a guy, by the way, who's saying stuff like, get out, get amongst some guys with some testosterone running through the veins, that actually have a set of balls, and get with the program. Stay off mainstream media, maybe move out from where you're living with your mum and get out in the real world and experience what everyday people go through. And I know it's not Australia, this is America, but what happens there affects us here. And it was just great to see that it wasn't just a narrow victory, it was an absolute landslide, which just gives me a bit of faith that the world is waking up and enough of this shit. Let's you know, of course we have to understand the world has changed to some extent. A lot of people have to be more understanding and accepting, and I get that, but not all this woke shit rammed down our throats, and more importantly, our kids' throats at schools. I hate it. So anyway, that's my little 2.5 minute little rant about that. But no, just it's a great day today, and yeah, it's as I said, I know there'll be a few out there that don't agree, and that's fine. But I, for one, am very happy that we have Donald J. Trump back in the White House to finally restore, hopefully, some balance to the world, get these knuckleheads of these countries that are playing up together, bang their heads together, and get everyone back on the same page. Because at least now we have a presence in the world who has some kahunas, and is not going to just bow to the, you know, to the minorities and spend more time worrying about just stupid shit than actually what's going on, the important stuff going on in the world, and that's a safe, prosperous planet. So anyway, we'll move on. The only thing I did see in the last sort of 24 hours that I think it's worth sort of mentioning, and again, that people have differing views, so I won't spend too much time on it, was that the quote-unquote female boxer that won the gold at the Olympics, I'll just pull out my phone for a sec because I did take a screenshot of it because I want to read it. So what was her name? Was it Iman Khalif? That was her name. How quickly she's been forgotten. But it says here, French medical records reveal Olympic women's boxer Iman Khalif has testicles and a micro penis. Hospital records from 2023 reveal Khalif does not have a uterus and instead has internal testicles and a micro penis resembling an enlarged clitoris. So the report, drafted by expert endocrinologists, two of them there, reveals that Khalif is impacted by 5-alpha reductase deficiency, whatever that is. It is a disorder of sexual development that is only found in biological males. So let's see where this one goes, because of course we're all called some horrendous names for questioning that Iman Khalif was in fact a male competing against biological females. And I think there was also something in there that says he does have, he, whatever, has actual XY chromosomes. It's been that long since I've spoken about it, I can't remember, but the chromosomes of a male. So anyway, I'm not quite sure what will happen there, whether there'll be protests or appeals, whatever it might be, but I thought that was interesting that's come up now, and let's see what happens. All right, guys, so we'll move on to another couple or stories about myself. I really welcome, by the way, all the comments and messages and everything that everyone sent me. You all obviously appreciate and like the stories, which is great. I've got plenty more to tell, and I'll tell a couple more today. But interesting though, the views of the channel of these walking boxings have dropped significantly since I've started the story. So I'm not quite sure that's a sign or whatever. But anyway, we'll continue on, because again, not a lot to talk about in the boxing world just at the moment. That's going to obviously increase over the next few weeks, but at the moment I'll fill in the gaps with a few stories about myself. And first one I want to talk about today is my experience with the all-time great fighter, Australian fighter, Lester Ellis. And I'm just going to get Neil, because this stupid dog we go past every day tends to bark at us. So my experiences with Lester Ellis, the Master Blaster. Now, back in 1985, of course, he won the IBF Super Featherweight World Title with that win over One Kill You in Melbourne Festival Hall. I still remember it as, I think I was an 11-year-old, and he was just like a lot of people out there, a lot of kids especially, our hero. What a brilliant fighter that he was. And he just won after he just won that world title, he was at the Royal Children's Hospital appeal. Now, if you're from Melbourne, you know what I'm talking about. It's on every year. They raise millions and millions of dollars for the Royal Children's Hospital. Well, he was there, and I remember I can't remember if it was my mum or my grandmother or something like that, because they were up for Easter, and he was on the TV. And at that stage, it was all about the footy players. You know, you'd ring in and you could talk to one of the football players. Make a donation, and they get one of the players on, and of course I had all the players walking around, and I spotted Lester Ellis in the background, and as I said, my mum or my grandmother, whatever, said you've got to call. Being an 11-year-old kid, I was very shy and didn't really want to do it. Well, I rang, and I got to talk to Lester Ellis, and to me that was a highlight of my life at that stage, to talk to the great Lester Ellis just after he'd won that world title. And I still remember it. It was fantastic, and he was awesome. You know, he's like, "G'day champ, how you doing? Yep, thanks for the call," and everything else. Because while everyone else was talking to the footy players, I just wanted to talk to Lester. So that was probably the first experience I had, just talking to him, sort of meeting him, I suppose you could call it. We'll call it that, virtually meeting him. But then I don't know whether it was, because I'm getting into 1988 this year, and I can't remember if it was 87 or 88 that we actually went down to Kyneton, which is a little town in Victoria, and to a gym owned by a guy named Greg Tiger Muir. Now, the reason I sort of knew Tiger was that there was some other boxers in Bendigo. They were adults, they were men, and they used to come up to our gym and do some sparring. Dean Roylance and Dave McGregor were the name, and they knew Lester and Tiger and everything else like that, and they said, "Well, do you want to come down and meet Lester?" And I was like, "Of course I want to do that." But even better was bring your gear and you might be able to do some rounds. Well, I was like, wow, I actually didn't think it was possible, if I'm being honest. But myself and my brother actually went down with Dave and Dean, and I walked into the gym in Kyneton, Tiger Muir's gym, and there is Lester Ellis, wrapping the hands, having a chat. And I was so awestruck, I nearly fell over, if I'm being honest. Because just then you got to realise, if you weren't around then, or you're from another state or whatever, in Victoria or Melbourne especially, he was just the matinee idol. He really was. He was an absolute superstar. At that time, he was just riding a wave. He was about to, I think he'd beaten, I reckon it might have been after the Barry Michael fight. So maybe he'd had a 1 or 2 comeback fights since then, but it was definitely after he lost his title. But anyway, I walked in there, and he was awesome. Shook a hand, said, "G'day guys, how you doing?" And we watched him warm up, and I can't remember what he sparred beforehand, but we did some training with Lester, and then he said, "Come on, we'll do some rounds." Well, I was very hesitant, if I'm being honest, but soon as I started the glove up, the excitement and the adrenaline and everything sort of started pumping through the veins, and I got in the ring and had a spar with Lester Ellis, and he was just unbelievable. Just looked after us, of course, but just I remember just the speed and the movement, and just an excellent fighter, and it was a highlight. And he actually he pumped up the pace a few times, and we got into it a little bit, but of course he was just looking after me. I was only probably 15 or something like that, 14 or 15, but just an absolute pleasure to share the ring with him. I remember Keith Ellis was there as well, and I remember because he said to Lester during the spar, he said, "Watch this little prick, he's pretty good." I don't know whether it was just pumping me up or whatever, because I had this thing that when I sparred, and it wasn't probably the right mentality, but the game's on. Like as a kid, you don't really know that you're only just supposed to go easy and look after your opponents and learn. I didn't really sort of know that then. I just had the rawness, I suppose, where I just wanted to get in and punch on, and it didn't really matter whether it was Lester or anyone else. I sort of took it to him a little bit, and as I said, he really looked after me, but it was just great to share the ring with him, and it was an experience I'll never forget. And even at this start, I've met him a few times since then. He came to a couple of my promotions when I was promoting, and I'm remembering him shaking my hand and saying, "Mate, great job, love what you're doing," and it was just a real highlight. And to this day, I've got the absolute respect for Lester, and he's definitely up there as one of my favourite fighters of all time. So that was just a couple of times I interacted with Lester. Really great memories back then. I think it really helped me, just my mindset going forward, that to be in there sort of punching on with Lester. And I remember sparring with a few other guys as well. I remember doing some great rounds with Tony Mad Dog Miller. He used to come up to the gym up in Bendigo, and we had some great spars. He was a great guy as well, Tony, and he actually fought Lester as well. So anyway, they were, a couple of good memories from the great Lester Ellis. All right. Let's get into 1988, the next year of my little boxing journey. And I think I had about 8 or 9 fights again that year. And again, went undefeated for the year. I didn't lose in 87, didn't lose in 88, and got to the Nationals. And where was it? It was Lake Hume, that's where it was. And a little bit like the previous year with Lake Dartmouth, where there was like a circus tent. This was the same, it was a big tent. I can't remember, it was in the middle of an oval or something like that, but it was at Lake Hume. And I can't remember who I fought in the first fight, but I definitely remember the final because it was against a guy from New South Wales called or named Matthew Jones was his name. And he was a really stocky, solid guy, 57 kilos it was. And he won his first fight very impressively as well. I remember thinking, geez, I've got my work cut out with him, because he was a real stocky, had the shaved head, really bit of a cocky young kid, and really sort of backed himself, really defined in that as well. And what were we, 15 at the time? So yeah, I fought him in the final, and that was a really tough fight, and I did win the decision. But I remember getting out of the ring being pretty sore. I reckon I might have even had 3 fights, at least 2 anyway, at the Nationals. But so that was my second Australian title. Now I also that year fought again in Bendigo, and it wasn't as big a deal this time either. I think the fights in Bendigo might have been just before the Lake Hume Australian titles, and if I'm being honest, I was very lucky to get the decision. I'm just putting it out there. I fought a guy named Peter Papus. I'd fought him a couple of months earlier and beaten him quite conclusively. But in Bendigo, probably the first one of those fights, and there's been a couple in my career, and I'm sure everyone has them, where you get a little bit complacent, and I just expected it to happen. And as I said, it wasn't as big a turnout as the year before. I'm not sure whether there wasn't as much promoting it, or I'm not sure why, but there wasn't the same sort of buzz there. And yeah, as I said, I was lucky to win. I got the decision. Look, it was close, but if I'm being honest, I sort of stood there and thought, geez, I might be a chance of dropping this one. I just couldn't fight, I just couldn't get going, and he was a real inside sort of worker. I think he was a couple of years older than me as well, but and he was a good little fighter. And I might have fought him a third time, actually. I think I beat him every time, but I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 times before. It was at least 2, but yeah, I was pretty lucky. And I thought also that year too, I fought a guy named David Spachman, who was another really tricky guy, and I think I might have fought and beat him twice that year as well, and amongst others. But he was a really good guy, good family, good gym, and just one of those really awkward type of guys who gave me a really good fight. So they were probably the ones that year. So for, I suppose, up to that stage, I probably had, what, probably about 20 to 25 fights, I reckon, up to that point. So I was really starting to get the ball rolling, and now 2 Australian titles under my belt. So I was feeling pretty good about myself, but I'd have 1 more year in the league as a junior, and I'll go over that in the next episode in 1989. But really at this stage, yeah, really starting to tick along and really starting to get some momentum. And also that year, if you can remember as well, before I finish up here, the 1988 was also the year that Graham Spike Sheeny made the final of the Olympic Games and lost the decision to the Russian, but still took home the silver medal. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember that song they used to play during the Olympics. I think it was the Sons and Daughters of the Southern Land or something like that. It was a brilliant song and all the highlights, and that was a catalyst. That was when I said to myself, I'm going to represent Australia at the Olympic Games. I was so taken aback with Spike Sheeny. Add him to the heroes list. What he did at those games, to have 5 fights, he won 4. From memory, I really remember the fights with the Swede and the American. He beat an American named Todd Foster, I remember, who had big raps on him, and unfortunately ran into the Russian in the final and lost a decision, which he did avenge after those games. It was pretty funny, because after that, those Olympic Games in Seoul, they actually had a fight night on Sky Channel, and it was all amateurs, headlined by Spike Sheeny versus this Russian, and he got over him this time. But it's just one of those things. And Spike, look, he was a very, very good fighter, but probably not talented enough, in my opinion, to be able to win a silver medal. But he did, because everything just clicked for him. He fought every fight. He just fought the perfect fight, except for the last one, of course. But I've got so much respect for Graham Spike Sheeny, for what he did at those games. I remember Darren Obar was there. He lost. I think he might have got knocked out in those games. That was obviously the how you doing? That was obviously also the Olympics where Roy Jones Jr. got really ripped off in his fight as well. So it was a memorable game, but I just remember watching those games, and not just actually Spike Sheeny. I remember Debbie Flintoff King won the gold medal as well. And back then we didn't win a lot of gold medals. I know it's just we just win gold medals for fun these days, but back then we might only have won sort of 3 or 4 gold medals at a games. But I remember, yeah, not only those ones, but Spike Sheeny especially, winning that silver medal. And even though it was only the silver, again, he was another one added to the hero list. And it's just a bit of a shame he didn't go on with it in the pros, Spike Sheeny. Again, probably style. It was a very, very basic style, but it was effective at those games. Not so effective after that, but doesn't matter. He got the silver medal, and what a performance that was. And that's when I really, really decided that that's what I was going to go for, the Olympic Games, and what would potentially happen 8 years later. So guys, that's going to do it for today. Again, thanks for everyone for the messages and the comments and all that sort of stuff. Even if you don't agree with what I say on here, thanks for watching. And again, stay tuned, because I've got plenty of good stories coming up. Hopefully we'll have some other boxing news to talk about as well, rather than listening to me every day. But again, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all those stuff that people say to do, and we'll catch you tomorrow.